everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Israel's war with Hamas is now 6 months in. War spills rivers of blood, and it also drains the soul. This week, 7 relief volunteers were killed in a horrible tragedy. Just after October 7th, Jose Andres' World Central Kitchen came to Israel to help Israelis. According to the Times of Israel, they came right away. They came with a budget, they came with infrastructure, they came with volunteers, and they served over 2 million meals to terrified and grieving Israelis. The IDF has apologized appropriately. The fog of war is very real and devastating. But as Congressman Richie Torres said in Jerusalem this week, and I quote him, "If Hamas remains in power, there will never be an end to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. There will never be an end to the cycle of violence and warfare. And I would add, there will never be a future for Palestinians or Israelis if Hamas continues to plague Gaza." And so here we are. Hostages still in Hamas's brutal, sadistic hands, living through God knows what. A world cruelly indifferent to Jewish suffering and to Israel's right to defend itself as any nation would. A world blind to Hamas's evil, how they shoot from hospitals and UN buildings and apartment buildings, how they even celebrate Palestinian deaths, because the more deaths, the better their negotiating posture. They say this. Because the more deaths, the greater the possibility that they'll live another day to murder Jews. They say this. None of that's changed. Anti-Semitism hangs like a dark cloud over us. It reminds me of the old joke. What's the difference between a Jewish pessimist and a Jewish optimist? The Jewish pessimist says things can't get any worse. The Jewish optimist says, oh, don't be so pessimistic. Of course they can get worse. So this Passover is going to be different. It's going to be less joyous. It's going to be more somber. And I've been thinking about a declaration in the Passover Haggadah that rings especially true this year. It's at the beginning of the section we call the Magid, the telling of the Passover story. And in the Haggadah, we read these words. It says, "More than one enemy has risen up against us. Indeed, from one generation to the next, enemies arise to put an end to us, but the Holy One saves us from their power." This is a major theme of the Passover celebration. In every generation, one to the next, we face enemies bent on our destruction. And today, it seems in every corner of society and throughout the world, they are rising up against us. But tonight, I want to reframe our view of this moment. I want to ask us to consider this time through the lens of Jewish history, and I want to share 2 brief words of Torah that argue for hope. So first, the Bible records that even at King David's lowest moments when he thought the kingdom was lost, that's when he wrote his most inspiring poetry. You're all familiar with Psalm 23. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear, because you, O God, are with me." We Jews have stood at the abyss time and time again, and every time we find the strength and the resilience and the creativity and the steely optimism and faith in our future, and that's what's brought us out of the valley of the shadows. And here's the second example. Years ago, my friend Rabbi Nami Kelman wrote about last week's Haftarah from the book of Ezekiel. Now, in this section of the Bible, this section of the prophecy of Ezekiel, Jerusalem was about to be destroyed, and Ezekiel knew it. He knew what was coming, and this was his message. He said, "Our bones are dried up. Our hope is lost." In Hebrew, ve'avda tikvatenu, our hope is lost, and we are cut off from life. Those are the devastating words forecasting the horrors that Ezekiel knew were coming. But then Ezekiel says, God promises, "But I will put my breath into you, and you shall live, and I will place you in your own land." Hopeful words. Now here's why Ezekiel's words are important. Here's what you need to know about Ezekiel's prophecy. Centuries later, in 1877, a modern Hebrew poet named Naphtali Hearst Imber wrote a poem that would become Hatikvah, Israel's national anthem. And in it, he turned Ezekiel's words on their head. Ezekiel said, "Avda tikvatenu, our hope is lost," but Imber added two words, "Od lo avda tikvatenu, our hope is not yet lost." Here we have this modern Hebrew poet challenging an ancient biblical prophet, as if Imber was saying, "Ezekiel, you say our hope is lost? No. Od lo. We Jews, we don't lose hope." Now, it would be another 71 years before Imber's stunning words were sung in Tel Aviv as Israel was reborn, but that hope, Hatikvah, the hope, always burned in the Jewish soul, always. Even in a dark moment like this, we have to remember Jewish history is a miraculous story of overcoming the worst, and also a treasury of glorious contributions to the betterment of humanity. Today's trials are hard, but they're nothing new. We've been here before. We will be okay. Od lo avda tikvatenu. We Jews, we never lose hope. We will emerge from this darkness strong, just as we always have. Shabbat shalom.